All right, let's talk about ultra-processed food. You've heard this term everywhere, right? It's like the new bad guy in the world of nutrition. But what if I told you that whole idea, that label, is actually kinda scientifically broken? Yeah. So today, we are gonna totally dismantle that buzzword and show you a much smarter, simpler way to figure out what's really on your plate.
Okay, picture this. You're in the grocery store. You grab, I don't know, a loaf of whole wheat bread, maybe one of those plant-based burgers, and you kind of pause for a second. Is this thing good for me? Is it ultra-processed? If you've ever had that little moment of confusion, well, you've just hit on a massive problem with how we all talk about food.
And hey, if you feel that way, you are definitely not alone. It turns out the reason for all this confusion, well, it isn't you. It's literally baked right into the term itself. This popular definition of ultra-processed is, to be blunt, scientifically vague and just a total mess. So let's get into it. The ultra-processed problem. We're going to unpack exactly why this super influential buzzword is, built on such a shaky foundation.
Now, to be fair, all this concern isn't just coming out of thin air. We're talking more than 43 studies, that's a lot, that have linked these so-called ultra-processed foods to not-so-great health outcomes. And that's exactly why you see all the scary headlines. It's what's fueling all the worry.
So where did this whole thing come from? Well, it was kicked off by a system called Nova, way back in 2009. And the big idea, as you can see from this quote from its creator, was to get us to stop looking at just nutrients and start looking at the processing. And on the surface, that sounds pretty logical, right? But this is exactly where all the trouble starts.
So what is wrong with Nova? Well, it turns out the entire system that started this whole global conversation has some fundamental flaws. Let's take a look.
Okay, here's the bombshell. You've got all these major systems, including Nova, right? And they all claim to group food by its processing level. But just look at this. None of them, not a single one, actually gives you a solid, measurable definition of what a processing level even is. It's a whole system built around a term that it completely fails to define.
And this isn't just some little mistake. As the food scientist Yurjo H. Rose points out here, the system is missing a common processing variable. So what does that mean in plain English? It means there's no consistent, objective, scientific rule for why one food gets tossed in the ultra-processed bucket and another one doesn't. It's basically subjective.
And this is the really crucial part. See, in actual food science, the word ultra means something super specific and measurable. Think ultra-high temperature, UHT, for milk. That's a precise engineering term. But when you stick it on the front of processed food, it's not a scientific measure at all. It just becomes this vague, kind of scary-sounding word meant to make you feel something, but there's no real standard behind it.
Okay, so if the old way is so broken, what's the solution? Well, this brings us to a much clearer way of thinking. A new framework called FPL, which stands for Food Processing Level. Now, the FPL system is a total game changer, and here's why. It's objective. It's not based on feelings. It's built on real chemical engineering principles. It actually measures the type and the intensity of the changes, both physical and chemical, that a food goes through on its journey from the farm to the package.
So here's how it works, and it's actually pretty straightforward. It's all broken down into these clear steps. You've got FPL 0, which is just minor physical stuff, like washing or slicing an apple. Then FPL 1 is for major physical changes, like milling wheat into flour. FPL 2 is where we start seeing minor chemical changes, like when you bake that flour into bread. And finally, FPL 3 is for the big stuff, major chemical changes, like turning cornstarch into sweeteners. See? It's a really logical flow.
And this new FPL system, it lets us make a really, really important distinction. And honestly, if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this next point. Because understanding this, it changes everything.
Okay, so here it is. Processing versus formulation. Processing is simply the actions you take on the food. Think heating, milling, mixing, freezing. But formulation, that's the ingredients you add to the food. We're talking sugars, fats, salt, additives, the recipe. See the difference? For so long, we've been blaming the processing when a lot of the time, the real issue is the formulation. This FPL system finally lets us tell them apart.
All right, to really see how this works, let's follow a single grain of wheat on its journey. This is going to make it super clear.
So you take that grain and mill it into flour. That's a major physical change, so boom, FPL 1. Now let's bake that flour into bread. That creates some minor chemical changes, which puts it at FPL 2.
But what if we go further? What if we chemically break down the starch in that grain to make glucose syrup? Well, that's a major chemical change, putting it at FPL3. So you can see how one single grain can end up in products all across the processing spectrum.
So what does all this actually mean for you and me? How do we take this new way of thinking and use it to, rethink what's on our own plates?
And this is where it all clicks into place. It's a system called Processed Food Intake, or PFI. And what PFI does is give us the complete picture. It looks at two things at once: the food processing level, the FPL we just talked about, and the formulation. So it's not one or the other. It's the processing plus the recipe. Both matter.
So what's the bottom line here? It's this. You can pretty much stop worrying about that vague, unscientific label, ultra-processed. Instead, just remember that crucial difference between processing, the actions, and formulation, the ingredients. When we use a clear system like FPL and PFI, we can finally stop pointing fingers at a blurry concept and start focusing on what actually matters for our health, the ingredients themselves, and the specific things that were done to them.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. What happens if we, as a society, move beyond this confusing, ultra-processed label? If we start using precise tools to actually understand our food, could we finally focus on what really matters? Think about it. Could this clarity actually help us design food that's healthier, safer, and more sustainable for all of us? That, right there, is the real potential in all of this. Thanks for digging into it with me.